Welcome to video 3, where we will talk about data tables in depth. And before I make a video about data tables, let's do a search in Google requiring all of the following words: what if, data, table, video, Excel, and YouTube. That's fairly specific, and we get almost 32,000 results. And my guess is almost 32,000 of those are going to be better than the one I'm about to create. But still, we can agree on some common color coding system and terminology by working off of my video. I encourage you to go out and look at the rest of those on YouTube. So let's go back to video 1. It's very difficult for students and for myself to visualize that this is an actual data table. In fact, it looks practically exactly like this. The only thing that's missing up here is we didn't need our output cell up here. What I've found teaching this over a few semesters is that if we will agree on a color coding system or a formatting system for these data tables, it will make it very easy for us to visualize them, and they'll just pop right out at us. And so let's think first about what a data table requires. It's going to require either a row and or a column of inputs to go into an input cell or two. And then it's going to require an output to monitor, so that it can paste the results from there into the data table. And then it will have the output of the data table itself in a grid. So let's agree on the following format for this semester. Let's put borders around that output with an Alt-H for home, B for borders, and A for all. So Alt-HBA. And then let's give a background color to the row inputs. Alt-H for home, H for background color, and let's choose this blue. Now, since it's going to be relatively impossible to confuse a row input with a column input, we'll go ahead and select the column inputs and give them the same color with Alt-HH. And choose that same blue. Our output, let's do Alt-HH and choose a green. And we've already put borders around all the table output cells. Don't confuse the output formula with the output of the table itself, or table results, perhaps I should say. Notice that the formula on the table results, if I click on any one of those cells, I see curly brackets with a table function and curly brackets. It's impossible to populate this without going through the menu, the data, what if, data table menu. But after you go through that menu, what Excel does is populates this function and the results. So the results are actually live. If we were to change our present value, then it would update the table with the new results. So even though we can't update this formula, it dynamically looks at the rest of our model for any changes. I'll undo that to get that back to 1,000. So let's think about how we would format the data table on video 2. We would have inputs that we said would be blue, Alt-HH, choose a blue. We would have outputs, Alt-HH, choose a green, and notice that this time we have two outputs. And then the results of the data table, Alt-HBA, for home borders all. Hopefully this makes it more easy to visualize how this data table is set up. Now let's do some practice. Probably the most important model to most of you students is going to be the calculation of your grade. In my course, participation is worth 10%. Tests are worth 60%. A team project is worth 10%. And the final is worth 20%. So if you know what score you got on each one, let's say we had a 90, an 85, and a 92, and an 87, then our course grade could be the sum product of those. If you're not familiar with sum product, just Google it, find out what it does. Multiplies each of those together and adds them up for an 86.6 in the course. Let's say we wanted to use a data table to look at a range of possible outcomes of our course grade based on what we might get on the final exam. First, I'll do this with a horizontal data table, and I'll say final exam grade and course grade. If we wanted to look at final exam grades, including 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100, and then find out what the course grade was for each, this may look like a bit of a random way to line these out, but when we put our formatting on, if we know we want our outputs here, Alt-HBA, and we know that these represent our inputs, Alt-HH, choose a blue cell, blue color, and that the course grade represents our output, Alt-HH, choose a green one. Now it looks a bit more familiar. We haven't seen a horizontal one yet, but you can probably tell from the previous 2 pages what we're looking at here. If we select all of that and go Alt-A-W-T for data table, we only have a row input cell. We don't have a column input cell. So in the row input cell, we will choose D6 because that's where we want the 60 through 100 placed. And when we hit OK, we see that we can make an A, B, C, D, or even a high F and still end up with a B in the course. We wanted to lay this out in a slightly different format, say final exam grade and course grade. Instead of listing the final exam grades immediately here, I'm going to leave a blank cell just like we did here, and you'll see why in a moment if you don't already. Because that leaves room for our green cell. Let's color these blue with an Alt-HH blue. And then our green cell will represent the course grade as the output of our model. Alt-HH green. And we know we want the results of our data table to have borders. Now we can select all the colored cells, Alt-A-W-T. We don't have a row input, but we do have a column input. So let's choose to put the column input in D6 and say OK. And we see the same results as before. Let's do one more data table, and this will be a 2-dimensional. So if this was a 1-dimensional horizontal, and this was a 1D vertical, then this will be a 2-dimensional. And let's say here we wanted to look at not only our final exam grade, but also a participation grade. We wanted the output to be our course grade. So let's start with our course grade in green. Alt-HH. And our final exam grades again in blue. Alt-HH. I'm going to use a trick here. I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to paste special. By the way, I can think of 5 ways to paste special. One is Alt-H, V, S to pull up the paste special menu. Another is Control-Alt-V to pull up the paste special menu. Another is to right-click in that cell and pull up the paste special menu. Yet another is to use the Windows key and arrow down to the paste special menu. But my personal favorite, because I grew up in an earlier version, is Alt-E-S. It's a legacy menu shortcut. any of those 5 ways you get to the Paste Special menu, you can come down here and choose Transpose. And if you check that, copy these and paste Transpose, it will transpose those from horizontal to vertical, and you don't have to re-enter them. And so I'm good with I'm doing Alt-HOI on that. Good with 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 on my participation grade and on my final exam grade. I just need to put some borders in here with an Alt-H-V-A. And now I'm ready to create the 2-dimensional data table. So we'll select all the colored cells, Alt-A-W-T for table. Now I have both a row input and a column input. In fact, the way I've done this, we're not going to be able to tell if we're right or wrong. If we reverse those, you won't see it in the output. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, surely my participation grade could be higher than that. I think it could be 80, 85, 90, 95, or 100. Now you'll see results in here that will tell you whether or not you got this correct. So if I do Alt-A-W-T, the row input cell is where I want the final exam grade to go. And the column input cell, we'll treat that no longer as a constant, but we'll treat the participation score as another input to our model. I won't bother to change the format. And it looks like our range, if we could get a 100 on the final exam grade and our participation grade came in at 100 versus the 90 we had expected, wow, that would put us just over the edge for a 90.2. So in this video we have looked at 1D horizontal tables, 1D vertical tables, and 2D tables. Those are the only 3 ways we can make an Excel what-if data table. I do want to talk one bit about calculation here. If you think about this file, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 data tables in it. So every time we type in something and hit return, Excel recalculates itself. Fortunately, these are pretty small data tables. But if they were large, or if the model behind them were large, this would really slow down our calculation. So Excel offers the option under File, Options, Formulas, and Calculation Options. We can have it calculate the entire workbook every time we change anything, or we can say calculate the entire workbook except for all these data tables. You could even say don't even calculate the workbook until I ask you to by pressing F9, but we will not use that in this course. What we may use later in this course when our models get big is this automatic except for data tables. So let's click that. And what that says is that if I changed the weighting of these grades, for example, from 10 to 60, notice it updated these 3 cells, but it did not update anything in the data tables. That's because our calculation in Excel is not updating the data tables. It saves us a lot of time, makes it run faster, but it can be very confusing if we don't see these things update when we intend to. The way to get them to update is to hit the F9 key, which I will do now, and it changes the numbers. So most of the time I keep my File, Options, Formulas, Calculations set to automatic because I get very confused when the data tables don't update. But when they get large and we really need to, we may go to this other option. Some textbooks would have you set this option all the time, but as I've stated, that's not my preference. There are 2 more points I'd like to make in this video. One is that with a 2D table, we're limited to only one output because there's only space for one green cell. But with a 1D table, we could have all the green cells this way we had room for, and all the green cells this way we had room for. For example, if I wanted to know what my lowest category was, I could use the min function and calculate the lowest category, and the max function to calculate where I scored the highest. And I could add those to either of these 1D data tables simply by adding the output and making it green. I'm going to copy Alt-DST for that format. Now if I'd done my data table originally this way, it would have all worked fine. I could have just highlighted this section and created the table. But now that I've already created a data table and I have this array formula in there, in order to make any changes to it, I need to erase all of those array formulas that say data or that say table. If I came in and tried to delete them one at a time, when I hit the delete key, I get an error. So I need to delete that entire array of outputs. And now I can go in and rebuild the table this way. Alt AWT. My row input cell is still the final exam grade. And I can populate the entire data table. We could also add green cells to the 1D, but not to the 2D. I hope you found this video helpful in learning about data tables.